I am Natalie Parker, 34, and yesterday my mother Eleanor disappeared with $10 million from our family safe. That money was my inheritance from Dad, a real estate mogul who passed last year. Most people would panic seeing their life savings stolen by the person they trusted most. I laughed instead. Mom had no idea what she actually took. The expression on her face when she discovers what was really inside those money bundles will be priceless. My father always said patience pays dividends. He was right. Before I dive into how my own mother tried to steal my inheritance, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever had a family member betray your trust, hit that like button. Family drama runs deep, and sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we should trust the least. Subscribe to hear more stories about family justice being served. Now, let's get back to how I outplayed my mother at her own game. I grew up in a sprawling colonial mansion in Brookline, one of Boston's most prestigious suburbs. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect American family. My father, James Parker, had built his real estate empire from nothing, transforming abandoned properties into luxury developments across New England. He worked 18-hour days while my mother, Eleanor, hosted charity galas and sat on museum boards. She was the quintessential socialite, always impeccably dressed in designer clothes, her dark hair professionally styled twice a week. What the country club members never saw were the explosive arguments behind our mahogany doors. My father would confront my mother about unexplained charges on their credit cards or her disappearances during family vacations. Once, when I was 12, I overheard him accusing her of having an affair with her tennis instructor. She denied everything, turning the blame on him for being an absent husband and father. "You care more about your buildings than your family," she would scream. There was some truth to that. Dad missed my piano recitals and swim meets, but he never forgot to call me before bedtime when he traveled. He kept a photo of me on his desk, not one of Eleanor. While my relationship with my father deepened as I grew older, especially after I joined his company at 25, my connection with my mother remained superficial. Our conversations revolved around appearances, my weight, my clothes, who I was dating. She criticized my decision to study business instead of finding a wealthy husband like she had. "Beauty fades, Natalie," she would say. "Lock down a rich man while you still can." 2 years ago, just after my 32nd birthday, Dad called me into his home office. I knew something was wrong from the way his hands trembled as he poured his scotch. "It's pancreatic cancer," he said without preamble. "Stage 4. 3 months, maybe 6 if I'm lucky." The diagnosis destroyed me. We sought multiple opinions, experimental treatments. Nothing worked. Within weeks, my strong, commanding father withered into a skeletal version of himself. During his final days, when morphine loosened his tongue, he called me to his bedside while my mother was at her weekly spa appointment. "Eleanor isn't who you think she is," he whispered, his breath ragged. "I've protected you from the truth. The safe in my office. Combination is your birthday. Check the false bottom after I'm gone." He died 3 days later. At the funeral, my mother's tears seemed rehearsed, stopping precisely when photographers were no longer watching. I noticed her brother Gerald, whom I'd only met twice in my life, hovering nearby. He'd appeared suddenly after years of no contact, claiming he wanted to support his sister during her grief. I didn't trust his sudden devotion. The formal reading of the will took place in my father's attorney's office. Margaret Hayes had been Dad's trusted legal advisor for 20 years. When she announced that he had left 70% of his estate to me, with only 30% going to Eleanor, my mother's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide her rage. "This is a mistake," she hissed, her manicured nails digging into the leather armrest. "James would never do this to me. I was his wife for 35 years. Margaret remained professional but firm. "Mr. Parker's wishes were very clear, Mrs. Parker. Natalie receives the majority share of both the liquid assets and the company holdings." After the meeting, Margaret handed me a sealed envelope. "Your father asked me to give you this privately. My advice: don't open it until you're alone." That night, I caught Eleanor whispering with the family accountant, Richard Simmons, in the garden. Their conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed me watching from the terrace. "Just discussing some tax implications," Richard explained too quickly. In the weeks that followed, I noticed Eleanor making frequent calls from the landline rather than her cell phone. She claimed she was planning a memorial charity in my father's name, but I never saw any documentation. When I asked our housekeeper Marta about my mother's activities, she mentioned that Eleanor had been shredding documents late at night. "Many papers, Miss Natalie," Marta said nervously. "She tell me never come to office when she working there." I remembered my father's deathbed warning. After ensuring Eleanor was at her bridge game, I entered his office and opened the safe using my birth date, June 12th, 88. Inside were property deeds, insurance policies, and stock certificates. Lifting the velvet lining, I discovered a false bottom containing a USB drive and a handwritten letter from my father. "My dearest Natalie," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've discovered what I've hidden from you and the world for years. Eleanor isn't just materialistic, she's dangerous." The process of liquidating my inheritance took nearly 8 months. My father's estate included properties across 6 states, investment portfolios, and several offshore accounts. Margaret worked tirelessly to ensure everything transferred smoothly despite Eleanor's attempts to contest the will. The court ultimately upheld my father's wishes, and I received approximately $10 million in cash as part of the initial distribution, with more assets still being processed. I decided to temporarily store the cash in our family safe while finalizing arrangements for new offshore accounts. In retrospect, this decision might seem naive, but I had strategic reasons that will become clear later. Almost immediately after the money arrived, Eleanor's behavior underwent a dramatic transformation. The mother who had barely acknowledged my existence for years suddenly became intensely interested in my life. She prepared my favorite breakfast each morning, asked about my day, and even suggested mother-daughter spa weekends. "We should spend more time together, darling," she cooed one evening, pouring me wine I hadn't requested. "Your father would have wanted us to support each other." The dramatic personality shift was my first red flag. The second came when I began receiving calls from unfamiliar financial institutions. "Miss Parker, I'm calling to confirm your request to transfer $5 million to our Grand Cayman branch," said a representative from a bank I'd never heard of. "I never made such a request," I replied, my suspicion growing. "Someone using your personal information initiated the transfer. They had your social security number and date of birth." After hanging up, I conducted a quiet search of Eleanor's desk while she was at her tennis lesson. Hidden beneath her stationery, I found several papers with my personal information written in her handwriting, including my social security number, mother's maiden name, and even my online banking passwords. More disturbing was what I found on her laptop, which she had carelessly left open. Browser searches for countries with no extradition treaties with U.S. and how to transport large cash sums internationally. She had been researching Belize extensively, viewing properties for sale and long-term visa requirements. The discovery sent me spiraling back through childhood memories, recontextualizing moments I had dismissed as normal family dynamics. I remembered how my 14th birthday party was suddenly canceled because Eleanor had scheduling conflicts, only to discover later she had taken a spontaneous trip to Paris with her friends. I recalled the Christmas she sold the antique watch my grandfather had given me, claiming it was too valuable for a child, and the money would be put in my college fund. That fund never materialized. Unsure how to proceed, I confided in my best friend Samantha over lunch at a restaurant far from any of my mother's social circles. "Your mother has always been self-centered, Nat, but theft is criminal," Samantha said, her legal background evident in her precise language. As a district attorney, she had seen family betrayals turn violent. "You need to protect yourself." With Samantha's help, I hired a private investigator who uncovered alarming information. Eleanor had accumulated over $300,000 in gambling debts at casinos in Connecticut and Atlantic City. She had taken out a second mortgage on a vacation property my father had left her, and there were multiple maxed-out credit cards in her name. The most shocking discovery came by accident. While having drinks at an upscale hotel bar in Boston, I encountered Marcus Fitzgerald, a charming investment banker who had attended several of my mother's charity events. After a few martinis, he mentioned he was planning a trip to Central America. "Belize has beautiful beaches," he said, loosening his tie. "Eleanor has been raving about the properties she's buying there. Said she's finally escaping her controlling family situation." When he realized he was speaking to Eleanor's daughter, his face paled. "I thought you knew about her plans." That night, I returned home determined to find more evidence. While Eleanor slept, I searched her closet and found a hidden compartment containing 2 passports, her legitimate one and a second issued to Eleanor Williams, with her photo but a different name. Beside them was a brochure for a beachfront villa in Belize with notes about private banking services. Instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to set a trap. If Eleanor was planning to steal my inheritance and flee the country, I would need irrefutable proof to bring her to justice. More importantly, I needed to protect what my father had worked his entire life to build. The sealed letter my father had left with Margaret provided the final pieces of the puzzle. Inside was a detailed dossier on Eleanor's past financial misconduct, including evidence that she had embezzled funds from her previous job at an art gallery before meeting my father. There were also records of suspicious transfers from my parents' joint accounts to unknown recipients over the years, always under the threshold that would trigger bank reporting requirements. "I stayed with Eleanor to protect you," my father wrote. "If I divorced her, I feared what she might do to hurt you to get revenge on me. I've documented everything in case you ever need to defend yourself." Armed with this information, I contacted Detective Thomas Reynolds, an old friend of my father's who had worked in financial crimes before retiring. Over coffee in a quiet diner, I showed him the evidence I had gathered. "Your father suspected something like this might happen," Thomas said, reviewing the documents. "He reached out to me about 6 months before he died. We discussed contingencies." Thomas introduced me to Blake Jensen, a security consultant who specialized in surveillance and tracking systems. Together, we developed an elaborate plan to catch Eleanor in the act. "The key is to make her think she's gotten away with it," Blake explained as he installed hidden cameras throughout our home. "We need her to cross state lines, ideally international borders, with evidence of her crimes." For the next week, I prepared the trap. First, Blake helped me create fake money bundles that looked authentic at first glance. We used newspaper cut to the size of dollar bills, with real $100 bills on the outside of each stack. Into several bundles, we inserted sophisticated GPS trackers that would activate once the packages moved beyond certain geographical boundaries. "These are military grade," Blake explained. "They can transmit from inside a safe, a car trunk, even certain types of secure facilities." I deliberately let Eleanor overhear a phone conversation with Margaret about keeping the full $10 million in the house safe temporarily because of concerns about banking irregularities. I made sure to mention that I'd be attending a financial conference in New York the following weekend, giving her the perfect opportunity. Next, I created decoy offshore account documents with access codes and passwords, leaving them in an accidentally unlocked drawer in my home office. I included account statements showing the full value of my inheritance plus additional family assets. "She won't be able to resist taking these," I told Samantha, who had become my confidant throughout the operation. I also compiled a folder of evidence about Eleanor's financial crimes, including her gambling debts, fraudulent passport, and communications with real estate agents in Belize. I placed this folder in the safe alongside the money, knowing that in her greed, she would take anything that looked valuable without examining it closely. The night before Eleanor's expected move, I pretended to take sleeping pills with my evening tea, making sure she watched me swallow them. In reality, I had palmed the pills and disposed of them later. "These new anxiety medications really knock me out," I told her. "I'll probably sleep until noon tomorrow." We shared what would be our final dinner together, a surreal experience where she played the role of doting mother while plotting to steal everything from me. She had prepared my favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. "To family," she toasted, raising her wine glass with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "To getting what we deserve," I replied, maintaining my composure. After dinner, I pretended to grow drowsy and excused myself to bed. Instead of sleeping, I monitored the surveillance feed from a tablet hidden under my blankets. I watched as Eleanor made phone calls in hushed tones, packed a small suitcase, and checked the safe combination multiple times, practicing opening it quickly. Around midnight, she received a text that made her smile. "All set for tomorrow," it read, from a contact saved as M. Marcus, no doubt, her partner in this betrayal. As I lay awake listening to the occasional creaks of our old house, I experienced a complex wave of emotions. Despite everything, Eleanor was still my mother. There was a moment of doubt, a whisper of the little girl inside me who wanted to believe she wasn't capable of this level of betrayal. But then I remembered my father's words and steeled my resolve. Some family ties aren't meant to bind us. Sometimes they're meant to show us who we should never become. I woke at 7:23 a.m. to an unusually quiet house. Normally, Eleanor would be in the kitchen by 7, making coffee and reading the morning newspaper. The silence was my first indication that the plan had worked. Still, I went through the motions of calling out for her, checking her bedroom, empty, bed perfectly made, and finally making my way to my father's office where the safe was located. The heavy door of the safe hung open, its contents gone except for a few documents Eleanor had deemed worthless. I stood there for a moment, taking in the scene that confirmed what I had expected. My own mother had stolen what she believed was $10 million from me and fled. At 7:45 a.m., the house security company called. "Miss Parker, we're calling to inform you that your home alarm was disabled at 3:17 this morning. Is everything all right?" "I need to check something," I replied, maintaining the facade of surprise. "Can I call you back?" I then called Margaret, allowing panic to seep into my voice. "The money is gone. My mother is gone. Everything is gone." "Stay calm, Natalie," Margaret responded, following the script we had prepared. "Don't touch anything. I'm calling the police." While waiting for the authorities to arrive, I reviewed the surveillance footage on my laptop. The cameras had captured everything. Eleanor entering the office at 3:12 a.m., opening the safe with practiced ease, carefully placing the money bundles and documents into a specialized duffel bag, and then taking one final look around the room before departing. The exterior cameras showed her loading the bag into a taxi at 3:24 a.m. The driver helped her with 2 additional suitcases. She never looked back at the house. I've watched too many family dramas and betrayals where people break down when facing moments like this. But there's something empowering about expecting betrayal and preparing for it. If you've ever had that gut feeling about someone close to you that everyone else thinks is paranoid, comment below. Sometimes our instincts know the truth before we're ready to accept it. At 9:37 a.m., my phone rang with an unknown international number. I answered on speaker, so the recording devices Blake had installed could capture the call. "Natalie, darling." Eleanor's voice was syrupy sweet. "I suppose you've discovered I've gone on a little trip. Where are you? Where's the money?" I demanded, playing my role perfectly. "That's not important. What matters is that I finally have what I deserve after all those years with your father. He never appreciated me, always favored you. This is simply my retirement plan. That money was my inheritance. How could you do this?" I allowed my voice to crack, giving her the satisfaction she craved. "Oh, honey," she laughed, the facade dropping. "It was never going to be yours. I've been planning this since before James died. Did you really think I'd let you walk away with everything while I got the scraps? I raised you, sacrificed for you. Please," I begged, feeding her ego. "Just come back. We can work something out." "It's too late for that. Don't bother looking for me. By the time you figure out where I've gone, I'll be settled in paradise. Goodbye, Natalie." 20 minutes later, Gerald called in a panic. "Is Eleanor with you? She was supposed to meet me this morning." "She's gone," I said flatly. "With the money. Your plan didn't include you, did it?" His stunned silence confirmed my suspicion that he had been an accomplice, expecting a share of the stolen funds. "You knew about this?" he finally stammered. "I know everything, Gerald. including your gambling debts and the money you borrowed from her. Did you really think she'd pay you after she got what she wanted?" He hung up without another word. By noon, Detective Thomas arrived with 2 officers from the Financial Crimes Unit. They took my statement and collected the surveillance footage. Thomas winked subtly when the other officers weren't looking. "We've received confirmation from airport security," he informed me officially. "Your mother was seen passing through international departures at 5:40 a.m. with luggage matching your description. Credit card records show she purchased a ticket to Belize City." After the police left, Samantha came over. Only then did I allow myself to smile. "It worked," I said, pulling up a tracking app on my tablet. "Look." The screen showed multiple blinking dots moving across a map, all converging on a single location, Belize City International Airport. "She took everything," Samantha said, impressed. "The fake money, the planted evidence, even the USB drive." "My mother never could resist taking what wasn't hers," I replied, even when it seemed too good to be true. The $10 million Eleanor thought she was stealing existed only in her imagination. What she actually took was an elaborate construction of worthless paper with a thin veneer of authenticity. Blake and I had spent 3 days preparing the fake money bundles. We started with stacks of newspaper cut precisely to the dimensions of U.S. currency. For each bundle, we wrapped the newspaper with just 5 real $100 bills, 1 on top, 1 on bottom, and 3 placed strategically throughout so that any casual inspection would show genuine currency. The bundles were then bound with authentic Federal Reserve bands I had requested from our bank when withdrawing a legitimate amount of cash. "The weight has to be exact," Blake had explained as we worked. "Currency has a specific feel that's hard to replicate." We used a postal scale to ensure each bundle matched the exact weight of a genuine stack of $100 bills. We even lightly sprayed the newspaper with a solution Blake had created that mimicked the particular scent of new currency. But the fake money was just the beginning. Hidden inside strategic bundles were 5 GPS trackers, each the size of a thin guitar pick. These military-grade devices would activate once they moved beyond the geofence Blake had established around our property. "These trackers transmit on multiple frequencies," Blake had explained. "They can send location data through most materials, including car trunks, luggage compartments, even some safes. Each has a battery life of approximately 2 weeks. More damning than the trackers were the documents Eleanor unwittingly took with her. I had created a folder labeled Offshore Accounts, containing what appeared to be access information to hidden family wealth. In reality, these documents included her own incriminating emails I had recovered, records of her gambling debts, evidence of her identity theft attempts, and financial fraud dating back years. Each page had been subtly marked with traceable ink that would show it had originated from her home printer. The USB drive was perhaps the most valuable item in the safe. 6 months before his death, my father had recorded Eleanor confessing to embezzlement during an argument they thought I couldn't hear. I had enhanced the audio and stored it alongside other evidence, including screenshots of her searches for non-extradition countries and photographs of her fake passport. Among the stacks of fake bills, I had hidden 1 bundle of legitimate cash containing $50,000. This was calculated precisely with Thomas's guidance. "For charges to stick," he had explained, "she needs to actually steal something of value. 50,000 crosses the federal threshold for grand larceny, but isn't enough for her to live on if she discovers the rest is fake." Before Eleanor's departure, I had coordinated with authorities both domestically and in Belize. The International Financial Crimes Unit had been alerted to watch for someone matching Eleanor's description attempting to enter the country with large sums of undeclared cash. The specially marked bills would trigger customs sensors, guaranteeing she would be stopped and searched. As Samantha and I watched the tracking dots on the tablet, we could see that they had stopped moving at the Belize City International Airport. One, representing the tracker in Eleanor's purse, had separated from the others and was moving through what appeared to be a security area. "They've got her," Samantha said, squeezing my hand. Thomas called to confirm what the tracking data had already told us. "Customs has detained her. When they searched her luggage, they found the money and documents. She's claiming it's all legitimately hers, but the evidence suggests otherwise. What happens now? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Belizean authorities will hold her while we process the international arrest warrant. The documents she was carrying constitute evidence of multiple financial crimes committed in the United States. We'll seek extradition. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. The woman who had given birth to me would likely spend years in prison. Yet the alternative, allowing her to steal my inheritance and disappear, was unthinkable. My father had worked too hard to have his legacy stolen by the woman who had made his life miserable. There's one more thing, Thomas added. When they searched her luggage, they found several pieces of your mother's jewelry that belonged to your grandmother. Items your father had specifically left to you in his will. That final theft, taking family heirlooms that had sentimental rather than just monetary value, confirmed I had made the right decision. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. 3 days after Eleanor's arrest, I boarded a flight to Belize. Margaret had arranged for a local attorney named Rafael Mendez to meet me at the airport. He greeted me with a firm handshake and sympathetic eyes. "Miss Parker, I'm sorry for the circumstances bringing you here," he said as we walked to his car. "Your mother is being held at the Central Belize Detention Center. I've arranged for a private meeting." The detention center was a stark concrete building on the outskirts of Belize City. After passing through multiple security checkpoints, I was led to a small room with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs. The walls were bare except for a surveillance camera in the corner. When the guards brought Eleanor in, I barely recognized her. Her carefully maintained appearance had crumbled after just 3 days in custody. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a beige detention uniform. Without her makeup and hair products, she looked every day of her 59 years. "Natalie," she said, her voice hoarse. "Thank God you're here. There's been a terrible mistake. You need to tell them this is all a misunderstanding." I remained silent, studying the woman who had been prepared to leave me penniless without a backward glance. "The money is yours, of course," she continued, attempting a smile that came across as a grimace. "I was just moving it somewhere safe. Those financial advisors you hired were stealing from you. I discovered their plan and had to act quickly." "Stop lying, Mom," I finally said. "The game is over. I know everything." Her expression shifted, calculation replacing desperation. "Whatever you think you know, you don't have proof. It's my word against yours, and I'm your mother." I placed a folder on the table and slid it toward her. "This is a copy of everything you took from the safe. Everything you're now carrying across international borders. Financial fraud, tax evasion, identity theft. The fake passport alone is a federal offense." As she flipped through the pages, the color drained from her face. "These are private documents. You had no right to go through my things. They were in my father's safe, in my father's house. A house that legally belongs to me now. James would never have wanted this," she hissed. "His own daughter betraying his wife." "Dad knew exactly who you were," I replied calmly. "He kept records of every suspicious transaction, every missing dollar, every lie. He stayed with you to protect me, not because he loved you." Her facade cracked. "He never appreciated what I gave up for that marriage. Do you have any idea what it's like to be arm candy for a workaholic who cares more about buildings than his own wife? You mean a man who built an empire while you spent his money and cheated on him? A man who knew you were stealing from him for years, but kept silent to maintain peace." Eleanor lunged across the table, her hands reaching for my throat, but the restraints attached to her wrists stopped her inches from my face. Guards rushed in and pulled her back. "You ungrateful little bitch," she screamed as they restrained her. "I gave you everything. You gave me nothing but lessons in what kind of person not to become," I replied, standing. "By the way, there was never $10 million in that safe. Just newspaper wrapped in a few real bills. You stole worthless paper." The rage that contorted her face in that moment confirmed every suspicion I'd ever had about her true nature. This was the real Eleanor Parker, not the polished socialite or the doting mother she pretended to be when it served her purposes. After Eleanor was taken away, Raphael updated me on the legal proceedings. The evidence is overwhelming. Beyond the attempted theft from you, the documents reveal financial crimes going back at least 15 years. There are other victims besides your father. Over the next week, the full extent of Eleanor's crimes came to light. She had been embezzling from various charity organizations she managed, using her position of trust to siphon funds meant for causes like children's hospitals and disaster relief. Gerald, her brother, was arrested in Boston when he attempted to access accounts associated with their scheme. His cooperation with authorities revealed Eleanor had been planning her escape for over a year, accelerating her timeline when my father changed his will. Most shocking was the discovery that Eleanor had attempted to steal from my father while he was on his deathbed. Bank records showed she had tried to transfer $3 million to an offshore account the day before he died, but the transaction had been flagged and stopped by the fraud department. When I returned to Boston, I found our social circle divided. Some of my mother's friends refused to believe the allegations, painting me as a vindictive daughter framing her mother out of greed. Others, who had suspected Eleanor's true nature for years, shared stories they had previously kept secret: missing donations from fundraisers, unexplained luxuries beyond our family's considerable means, affairs with wealthy men who subsequently found themselves dealing with financial irregularities. Marcus, Eleanor's lover who was supposed to meet her in Belize, had disappeared. The private investigator I hired discovered he had emptied Eleanor's secret bank account in the Cayman Islands. Approximately $200,000 she had been skimming for years and vanished. A fitting end for a partnership built on deception. The most difficult conversation was with my father's sister, Aunt Patricia, who had distanced herself from our family years ago after falling out with Eleanor. When I called to explain what had happened, she broke down crying. "I tried to warn James about her," she said through tears. "After your 5th birthday party, I caught her stealing my mother's antique brooch from the guest room. James didn't believe me. It caused a rift between us that never healed. He knew the truth before the end," I assured her. "He left letters evidence. He was protecting me, not her." As prosecutors built their case against Eleanor, I found myself reflecting on the nature of family and loyalty. Blood ties are supposed to be sacred, but what happens when those connections become toxic? Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is hold family members accountable rather than enabling destructive behavior. Eleanor's trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of financial crimes spanning decades. I testified for 2 days, detailing the trap I had set and explaining why I had felt it necessary to catch my own mother in such an elaborate scheme. "Miss Parker," the prosecutor asked during my testimony, "why go to such lengths? Why not simply report your suspicions to authorities?" "My mother is an expert manipulator," I explained. "Throughout my life, I watched her convince people that black was white and up was down. I needed irrefutable evidence that even she couldn't talk her way out of." Eleanor maintained her innocence until the end, claiming she was the victim of a vindictive daughter and a misunderstanding. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before finding her guilty on all counts. Attempted grand larceny, financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and passport fraud. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in federal prison. After the sentencing, Detective Thomas found me sitting alone in the courthouse corridor. "Your father would be proud," he said, sitting beside me. "Not just of catching her, but of how you've handled everything with dignity." With Eleanor's conviction came the process of recovering assets she had hidden over the years. Forensic accountants discovered accounts in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Singapore containing nearly $2 million siphoned from my father's business and various charities. The court ordered these funds returned to their rightful owners. I established the James Parker Foundation with a portion of my inheritance, dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud rebuild their lives. Many of Eleanor's victims were elderly people who had invested in fake charity schemes she had promoted at social events. The foundation provided both financial assistance and educational resources to prevent similar frauds. 6 months after the trial, I finally moved into my father's office at Parker Development's headquarters. I had been reluctant to disturb his space, preserving it like a museum to his memory. As I sorted through his personal items, I discovered a hidden compartment in his desk containing a journal he had kept for the last 5 years of his life. The entries detailed his growing suspicions about Eleanor, his efforts to protect the company from her interference, and his hopes for my future leadership of the business. The final entry, dated just days before his cancer diagnosis, read, "Natalie has the strength her mother lacks and the integrity I tried to instill. She will face difficult choices about Eleanor someday. I hope I've given her the tools to protect herself when that time comes." With Eleanor imprisoned and Gerald awaiting his own trial, I began reconnecting with estranged relatives who had been driven away by my mother's manipulations. Aunt Patricia introduced me to cousins I barely knew existed. Family dinners became genuine celebrations rather than performative social events where everyone walked on eggshells around Eleanor's unpredictable moods. The actual inheritance, managed carefully with Margaret's guidance, allowed me to expand Parker Developments into sustainable housing projects my father had always dreamed of pursuing. Each ribbon-cutting ceremony felt like fulfilling a promise to him. 6 months into her sentence, Eleanor requested a meeting. Against Margaret's advice, I agreed to see her one last time at the Federal Correctional Facility in Danbury, Connecticut. She looked older but more composed than during our confrontation in Belize. When she spoke, the manipulative sweetness was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "I underestimated you," she said without preamble. "You're more like me than I thought." "I'm nothing like you," I replied evenly. "I protected what Dad built. You tried to steal it." "We both know how to get what we want," she countered. "The difference is you had James teaching you how to do it legally." She proposed a deal. If I helped secure her early release and provided financial support afterward, she would sign away any future claims to family assets and disappear from my life permanently. "I have nothing to gain from that arrangement," I told her. "You've already lost any legal claim to the estate." "There are still secrets I could share," she threatened. "Things about your precious father that would tarnish his golden reputation." I stood to leave. "There's nothing you could say that would change who he was to me. Goodbye, Eleanor." As I walked away, she called after me, "I'm still your mother, Natalie. Blood means something." I turned back one last time. Family isn't just blood. It's trust. It's love. It's putting others before yourself. By that definition, you were never family. The following weekend, I visited my father's grave with fresh flowers. As I placed them against his headstone, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since his death. "It's done, Dad," I said quietly. "She can't hurt anyone anymore." What I didn't tell Eleanor during our final meeting was about the additional evidence my father had left. Among his papers was proof that she had been involved in real estate fraud before they met, assuming a different identity to escape prosecution. This evidence remained sealed with instructions to release it only if she ever attempted to secure early release. Some insurance policies are necessary when dealing with someone who sees every relationship as a transaction. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and doing what's right? It's one of the hardest decisions we face. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real family stories. The support from this community has helped me share experiences that might otherwise stay hidden in family closets. Comment below if you've ever had to stand up to a family member who betrayed your trust. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles is the most valuable inheritance. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, true family is built on actions, not just shared DNA.